Sokongan kukuh untuk dolar Amerika Syarikat. Ringgit menjadi lemah selama 5 hari berturut-turut dalam seminggu yang baru saja berakhir sebaik saja pengerusi Fed Amerika Syarikat Jerome Powell memberi kenyataan di hadapan jawatan kuasa perkhidmatan kewangan berkaitan memerangi inflasi Amerika Syarikat dan membayangkan kenaikan kadar faedah. Kenangan Investment Bank dalam satu nota berkata bahawa ringgit mencecah ambang 4.65 berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat buat kali pertama dalam tempoh lebih 7 bulan kerana mata wang tempatan itu diseret oleh kelemahan yuan di tengah-tengah prospek ekonomi China yang lemah dan langkah pelonggaran oleh People's Bank of China. Seterusnya, Bursa Malaysia dijangka mengalami dagangan berhati-hati dan pada kecenderungan negatif minggu ini dengan indeks penanda aras bergerak di antara 1,380 dengan 1,400 berikutan cabaran luaran. Pengarah urusan SPI Asset Management Steven Ines berkata, sentimen bertambah baik minggu lepas apabila pengurangan kadar faedah oleh People's Bank of China dan harga minyak mentah yang lebih tinggi membantu menstabilkan pasaran tempatan. Beliau berkata walau bagaimanapun pasaran mungkin berada dalam keadaan yang lebih lemah minggu ini kerana keseluruhan pasaran menjadi berhati-hati selepas beberapa bank pusat utama bersikap cenderung kepada kadar faedah lebih tinggi dalam usaha meredakan inflasi teras yang tidak berubah. Tambahnya, konsensus juga melihat inflasi di Amerika Syarikat sukar diturunkan tanpa rombakan ekonomi. Jika itu dilakukan, Malaysia akan diramal menerima tempias. Beliau menjangkakan FBM KLCC akan menguji tahap 1,380 mata minggu ini. Transformasi perniagaan daripada walk-in kepada dalam talian memberi limpahan berganda kepada pasangan suami isteri yang menghasilkan produk batik ikat celup. Malah strategi pemasaran secara dalam talian dan digital itu juga berjaya menyelamatkan perniagaan Muhammad Aimi Syafiq Rohaimi, 30 tahun dan isterinya Nur Adila Nasaruddin, 28 tahun ketika tempoh sukar pasca pandemik. Menurut Muhammad Aimi Syafiq, menerusi platform berkenaan, ia membuka peluang yang luas untuk memasarkan produk mereka sehingga mampu menarik pelanggan dari negeri yang lain. Katanya sejak memanfaatkan platform tersebut, jualan serta permintaan batik ikat celup yang dihasilkan mereka meningkat sebanyak 50%.
Kita orang bermula dengan kedai kak, tapi sebabkan permintaan tu kurang, permintaan sebab orang perlu walk-in, orang sekarang nak cepat, so kita orang cuba meluaskan dalam bentuk platform media sosial lah. Contohnya IG, TikTok, contoh lah. Kira ambil order pun daripada situ, perkenalkan produk pun dekat situ juga.
Pasangan yang mengusahakan perniagaan di Bukit Payung Marang itu juga ingin mencari kelainan daripada mencanting batik dengan mencabar kemahiran untuk menghasilkan batik ikat celup. Katanya perniagaan yang bertapak sejak tahun 2018 itu juga turut menawarkan kelainan kepada produk yang dihasilkan termasuk menerapkan batik asli Terengganu.
Kelainan yang kita orang cuba buat kat sini, kita orang dah buat produk yang siap pakai lah. Kira orang beli boleh terus pakai, tak perlu macam kalau dulu dia orang lebih meluaskan batik kain pasangan untuk kita pergi jahit apa leceh lah, sebab nak kena pergi jahit dulu, nak kena buat banyak step. So yang ni kita boleh terus pakai je.
Jelasnya ketika ini mereka hanya menghasilkan t-shirt serta kaftan berikutan mendapat permintaan yang tinggi. Katanya produk mereka dijual bermula dengan harga RM39 bergantung kepada corak yang dihasilkan. Pasangan muda ini turut berhasrat untuk meluaskan air tangan mereka ini sehingga ke negara luar termasuk Thailand dan sebagainya. Kerajaan mengumumkan pengurangan sebanyak 25% bagi pembayaran cukai taksiran harta bagi kategori kediaman rumah mampu milik di sekitar wilayah Persekutuan Kuala Lumpur. Pelaksanaan yang melibatkan projek perumahan yang siap selepas 2014 hingga kini itu bakal memanfaatkan 25,677 pemilik rumah mampu milik.
Perdana Menteri Datuk Anwar Ibrahim berkata ia membabitkan pengurangan hasil Dewan Bandaraya Kuala Lumpur di BKL sebanyak 2.07 juta ringgit dalam tempoh setahun.
Saya telah mendengar keluhan ramai daripada kawan, termasuk pekerja yang jaga lift, polis, bantuan, polis yang di peringkat bawah ini. Mereka minta supaya diberi pengurangan. Jadi, saya setuju untuk bagi pengurangan mulai penggal kedua tahun 2023 sebanyak kurang 25% daripada cukai taksiran yang ada sekarang. Ini melibatkan 25,677 pemilik rumah mampu milik di Putrajaya.
Beliau berkata demikian ketika berucap pada sesi temu mesra bersama pemilik rumah mampu milik Kuala Lumpur pada Jumaat. Ujarnya usaha itu secara tidak langsung mampu mengurangkan beban kos sara hidup bagi golongan B40 dan M40 di kawasan berkenaan. Dalam majlis sama, Anwar turut berasmikan tempat letak kereta Taman Tasik Metropolitan Kepong. Turut hadir Ketua Setiausaha Negara Tan Sri Muhammad Zuki Ali dan Datuk Bandar Kuala Lumpur, Datuk Kamruzaman Mat Saleh.
Pihak bank dan pemain industri solar dicadangkan menjalinkan kerjasama bagi memudahkan rakyat mendapatkan teknologi solar di negara ini. Menurut konsultan Zaytech Solution.
Advisory Committee to the Finance Minister and Advisor, Petronas. Mr. Amin H. Nasir, President and CEO, Saudi Aramco. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Muhammad Baki Saleh, Chairman of Petronas. Mr. Patrick Puyane, Chairman and CEO, Total Energies. Dr. Daniel Jurgen, Vice President, S&P Global. Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, Industry Captains, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning and a warm welcome to Energy Asia theme Charting Pathways for a Sustainable Asia. To all our international guests, we bid you Selamat Datang or welcome to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Today, we're truly privileged and honored to have the presence of the Right Honourable Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Thank you very much, Datuk Seri, for taking time off your busy schedule to join us today at the inaugural Energy Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, we begin the ceremony today with a prayer recitation led by Ustaz Shukri. For our non-Muslim guests, we invite you to join us in blessing the occasion with a prayer recitation of your respective faith. We shall now invite Ustaz Shukri to lead us in the recitation of the dua.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. O Allah, the most merciful and most compassionate, we thank you for our good health, peace and harmony that enable us to be here today for this celebrated occasion. O Allah, we ask for your blessings to make the Energy Asia 2023 a successful and memorable event. With the theme Charting Pathways for a Sustainable Asia, guide us as we journey towards a better and brighter world to come. O Allah, we ask for your knowledge and guidance to aid all of mankind in our journey in charting pathways for a sustainable future. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you, Ustaz Shukri, for leading us in the dua. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Yang Mulia Tan Sri Tengku Muhammad Taufik, Chairman of Energy Asia, to deliver his welcoming address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia, Your Excellency, Haitham Al-Gais, OPEC Secretary General, Honorable Ministers, dignitaries, Excellencies, distinguished guests, policymakers and industry captains, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good day to everyone. Welcome to Kuala Lumpur and to the very first Energy Asia. On behalf of Petronas and our partner S&P Global, permit me to extend my appreciation to Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim for gracing our event, and to all present today for joining us from around the globe. It is a great privilege to welcome the diverse and encouraging attendance of more than 3,000 delegates, over 100 speakers, and 46 sponsors representing 19 industries from across 27 countries. I'm encouraged by your presence today, which demonstrates the commitment of the global community to chart the net zero pathways that meet the needs of the present without compromising future generations. Petronas has convened Energy Asia driven by one simple belief: the world cannot achieve net zero without Asia achieving net zero. Asia represents 60% of the world population, and by 2040, we will see a very different world. This region will represent half of global GDP and 40% of global consumption. The immense complexity of the energy transition and meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement poses a systemic challenge. It just simply cannot be tackled by one industry, or one set of policymakers, or one country alone. Regrettably, in describing this challenge, there is a tendency for groups who dominate the discourse of climate change to use a very broad brush. To compound matters, the existential challenge we all face tends to stoke idealistic fervor. Regrettably, the challenge is also usually framed by developed economies. I have conveyed to many friends here, sometimes there is a disastrous tendency to forget that there are economies beyond the east of the Suez and south of the equator. The massive consumption of fossil fuel over the past half-century has powered global economic growth, from less than just $2 trillion in 1960 to around $100 trillion in 2022. Its primary beneficiaries have been developed nations who have contributed to most of the emissions today. At the time of writing, the largest emitters, the 5 largest emitters, contribute to 2/3 of global emission. Asia is made up of countries with vastly different economic maturities, where GDP per capita ranges from a very modest $2,000 all the way up to more than $90,000. The harsh reality is that even as we gather here today, 350 million in Asia still face challenges in accessing affordable and reliable electricity. Indeed, for many households across Asia, the struggle continues to be in determining how to survive the coming year, as opposed to ensuring the next generation inherits a livable planet in the decades to come. The governments in Asia are not climate deniers. Right here in ASEAN, all 10 countries have submitted their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, with most having pledged to a net zero aspiration. As ASEAN, we have even set an ASEAN renewable energy target of 23% in the energy mix by 2025. Here in Malaysia, the government has an NDC which aims to deliver 45% reduction in carbon emissions intensity by 2030, relative to 2005 levels, with a target of becoming net zero by 2050. Similarly, all our neighbors around us have ambitious targets. Given ASEAN's 130,000 kilometers of coastline, more than 25,000 islands, being home to 20% of global plant and animal species, representing an astounding biodiversity, here in Asia, we are amongst the first to acknowledge the threat of extreme climate change in its many forms: floods, eroding coastlines, and loss of biodiversity. However, we cannot ignore the economic realities of the present. And what we must recognize is that every nation must be permitted to formulate their own realistic and practical transition pathway. Therefore, the question we must address in this gathering of some of the best minds across Asia, and indeed beyond, is this: how can we ensure a sustainable future that tackles emissions but preserves the ability to pursue economic growth and foster equitable social progress? Energy is fundamental to our civilization and to the prosperity of nations. As you will hear in coming days, more energy will be required in Asia's development. The energy that Asia needs is the same basic necessity that many mature economies have already previously accessed reliably and affordably during their own ascension to economic prosperity and well-being. The actions we decide upon today will define the net zero future that we envision. This cannot and must not be a future where we end up with a livable planet, but where entire societies are left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered days after the UN has announced an acceleration agenda which describes fossil fuels as, and I quote, the polluted heart of the climate crisis. And the UN has called for the end of licensing, of funding for new oil and gas. As we approach COP28, this stance may well deny many nations energy security, even as they protect their inalienable right to pursue socio-economic prosperity, which others have already attained. There is no such thing as a perfect set of rules in a transition. Any transition involves learning, continuous corrections, refinements along the journey, but we need to start with something. So even here, as we converse, Energy Asia is actively working to reduce its carbon footprint as an event towards becoming a lower carbon conference by partnering with Atmos to optimize use of resources. Going forward, we're committed to making this gathering even more sustainable. Unlike other platforms, and I've mentioned this to our partners, Petronas is determined to ensure Energy Asia will not exclude industries, exclude sectors, or exclude segments of community. Why? Because we're all part of a massive energy system that must become affordable, accessible, secure, and sustainable. With experience and knowledge gathered here today, it is our belief that right here in Asia, we can formulate the actionable solutions for a just and responsible energy transition. What is critical is that we recognize the energy aspirations of all stakeholders and forge a pragmatic pathway where no one is left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, energy transition is a journey of change that cannot be achieved overnight. It is daunting, it is complex, and it is not linear. And much, much more must be done to bring to bear all the solutions that we have available to us. We cannot do this alone. I am hopeful that with our common ambition for a lower emissions future, we will rally to forge deeper and shape more meaningful collaborations here. Nothing less than an all-in effort from all stakeholders to steer us in the right direction. Asia is a region with abundant opportunities. It is not just a major energy market. It has the potential to accelerate its energy transition by leveraging on the learnings from other regions. As we work together, I believe we have what it takes to chart the pathways for a sustainable Asia that we want to see for our next generation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere hope that dialogues over the next 2 days will instigate new approaches and see many alliances form to address energy transition. The dialogues we convene must ensure our next generations live and prosper in a sustainable world that they deserve. So as I conclude, permit me to once again thank our Prime Minister, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, for joining us today, and my appreciation to all our partners, delegates, speakers, and sponsors for your valuable participation. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you.
Thank you, Yang Mulia Tan Sri Tengku Muhammad Taufik, for the welcoming remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that we invite Dr. Daniel Jurgen, Vice Chairman of S&P Global, to deliver his opening address.
Honorable Prime Minister, Tan Sri Taufik, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. Let me echo the warm welcome of Tan Sri Taufik to this most timely gathering in this wonderful city of Kuala Lumpur. And I have to say it's so impressive to look out at this audience and to realize the degree of participation. It's an honor for S&P Global, Seri Week by S&P Global, to be the knowledge partner with Petronas. I want to express our great appreciation to Taufik and Petronas for seeing the need for this conference and for seeking to really chart the pathways to a sustainable future. We are particularly honored by the President of the Right Honorable Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, from whom we shall shortly hear, And we greatly appreciate the participation of the distinguished ministers, other dignitaries, leaders of companies, and all of you who are here with us today. I was a little shocked by the quote that Tawfik had from the United Nations. I think in a sense that is motive force enough for us having this conference, because it exactly demonstrates that the need for this conference is based on the recognition that the voice of Asia needs to be heard globally with greater clarity on the subjects of energy transition and climate change. And that's for multiple reasons. As Tawfik observes, this is the most populous part of the world. It is also notably the most economically dynamic part of the world. It is the center of gravity in the growth of energy demand, and that will only become clearer and clearer in the years ahead. And it is a region with a strong focus on economic development, rising incomes, reducing poverty, and improving health. I think you'll all find this conference rich in content and perspectives, but I do want to highlight some of the key themes that will unfold over the next couple of days. First is obviously the central role that Asia will have in the energy future. As noted, this is the region where the growth in energy demand will be, and more to come. The population of ASEAN itself is 50% greater than the population of the European Union. Its combined GDP today is about $3.3 trillion, and within a quarter century, it will more than triple from that level. Second, the recent years have once again brought energy security and affordability to the fore, and it was really left out of much of the discussion over the last several years. It's now on the fore, and the need to assure secure and affordable energy while also seeking to promote the reduction in emissions. In fact, I think it's fair to say that without energy security, energy transition will be very difficult to achieve. Third, the critical technologies for the energy transition, including solar, wind, electric cars, are now at scale and increasingly at scale. The challenge of reducing the cost of infrastructure may become the constraint on their full deployment. Fourth, and I'm afraid this goes against the quote from the United Nations, while the balance in the overall energy mix will change, oil and gas will continue to be major parts of global energy supply, not for years to come, but for decades to come. But the future of hydrocarbons will also be more mixed and intertwined, with increasing emphasis on emission abatement and carbon management. Fifth, while the world moves towards more renewable energy, there is increasing concern about the resilience of the supply chains that will be necessary, whether it's the copper, the nickel, the lithium, the cobalt necessary for electric cars and offshore wind, or sufficient volumes of biomass for the targets for biofuels. Six, while the technologies for the transition continue to advance, whether in terms of electrification, hydrogen, carbon capture, methane capture, yet there is recognized to be a significant gap in the technologies. If you visit what's called the Innovation Agora, that is part of this conference, which is an extension of the Innovation Agora that's at CERAWeek in Houston, you will see how companies, entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, researchers are seeking to close that technology gap through innovation, and in many cases, amazing innovations. We can be sure that technology will deliver surprises and new solutions. Seventh, and finally, experience. Experience is inescapable. Experience forces thinking to be refreshed, and that last couple of years is leading to a rethinking of the meaning and application of ESG and the challenges of the energy transition. Indeed, last night in a conversation that some of us had, I started to think we are now seeing a transition in the thinking about energy transition. So we have a lot to do and a lot to learn over the next couple of days. Our hope is that in cooperation with Petronas, Energy Asia in Kuala Lumpur will be established as the primary forum in Asia for understanding the pathways to a sustainable future. and its applications will be not theoretical, they'll be very practical for collaboration and partnerships among countries and companies, for promoting investment, for advancing innovation and technology. And by doing all of that, this conference will be a contribution globally, and in particular to that part of the world in which 60% of the world's people live, which is Asia. So thank you, and again, welcome to Energy Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Jurgen, for the opening. To have Sarah Week by S&P Global as Energy Asia's knowledge partner. And now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to welcome the Prime Minister of Malaysia to the stage for the keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Right Honourable Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Menteri-menteri yang dimuliakan Tan Sri Tuku Taufik dan rakan-rakan dari Petronas, Sri Bakar, Tan Sri Hassan, tetamu-tamu kita, Setiausaha Agung OPEC, Hadir Makais, ada juga pengurusi Aramco, ada Daniel Yargen, rakan-rakan yang saya muliakan, satu penghormatan besar bagi Malaysia untuk menganjur atas nama Energy Asia, satu persidangan yang sangat penting dan mencabar. Dan saya oleh demikian mengalu-alukan kehadiran semua kerana kita harus mengemukakan satu pendekatan baru, mempertahankan keperluan perubahan dalam penggunaan tenaga, tetapi menjamin kelangsungan ekonomi negara yang disentuh sebentar tadi. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by sharing with you a small chat I had with his more pronounced personalities with impeccable credentials, the Haidam of OPEC and Amin of Aramco, Daniel and Patrick, and of course, Taufik and the rest. The consensus was that we need the transition, but the transition must be determined by all and subjected to the rigors of the industry requirements of each country. It must not be dictated by any group of countries. So I'm particularly impressed by the suggestion by Excellency Amin of Aramco, Amin Nasser, that we in Asia must also take a more proactive position and inclusive, as you suggested, to allow for voices of conscience in Asia. The need to change, yes. The need for transition, of course. But also the need to survive, to ensure that our present policies, alleviating poverty, in providing quality education, health and basic infrastructure, is not, will be necessarily frustrated because of the dictate of others that do not place adequate consideration to what we have to face. So I think that small session that we had, to me, is extremely meaningful. Today, as we know, 75% of the energy consumed in Asia comes from hydrocarbons, and by 2030, Asia's demand for energy is projected to double. The challenge is, how do we meet that demand in a way that balances energy security, affordability, and sustainability. While some countries are preparing the transition to cleaner forms of energy, others are struggling with access to complete electrification, clean cooking oil, energy security, and of course, I've alluded to the issue of education, health, and basic infrastructure. Affordability remains a key concern, particularly for parts of developing Asia, where people are not looking too far into the future, but might simply be struggling to pay the bill for the next week or put food on the table. Taufiq was referring to the next month. I'm referring to the following day and next week. Countries in Asia are not climate deniers, and indeed Asia is showing positive signs of embracing the energy transition, but countries across the region are moving at a different pace. 4 of the largest economies in the region, China, South Korea, and India, Japan, have committed, excepting India, of course, have committed net zero, achieving net zero by the middle of the century, while India has set ambitious renewable energy targets. In ASEAN, hydrocarbons will continue to be an important part of the energy mix to drive economic growth and development. Despite that, 9 out of 10 countries and in ASEAN have pledged net zero targets at COP26. However, net zero need not be a zero-sum equation. It should not be one of lowering carbon emissions at the expense of economic growth or vice versa, or, for that matter, the survival of these countries. Asia must take every opportunity to further dialogue and actions around how we can responsibly plan to enable every country its right to development and lower carbon aspirations. Within the ASEAN region, to meet its climate goals and achieve decarbonization, electricity interconnection and integration will be crucial to facilitate the sharing of renewable energy resources, encourage investment, and promote sustainable development. Malaysia, with its strategic central location, is committed to strengthening interconnection and collaboration with our neighbors for this purpose. Investors and financiers will risk losing out in not turning towards Asia, which is endowed with vast amounts of natural resources, potential renewable energy, and a growing population that's not averse to co-innovation and is increasingly appreciative of green economy. In the light of this, there's a further potential for the region to develop as a player in the net zero value chain, in as much as the rich biodiversity resources and a high percentage of forest cover offer abundant nature-based solutions. In addition to developing hydrogen and CCS opportunities for storing carbon, with the innovation of batteries and electric storage well underway, there is opportunity to develop the rare earth minerals and establish a conducive ecosystem to strengthen supply chain. Developing these resources and potential requires access to financing, technology, and innovation, the right policy framework, and skill sets for the future. Achieving the climate goal for the region will require significant traction in clean energy investment. Yet, developing economies face higher costs of capital for clean energy projects due to the perception of higher macroeconomic risk and the absence of deep capital markets. These are areas where stronger collaboration between the region and the rest of the world, between industries and sectors, is absolutely necessary to realize crucial energy and climate ambitions. Considering these challenges, Malaysia is determined to be well positioned to play our part in reducing emissions while ensuring they were ready for the growth of low-carbon economy. As part of the responsibilities of each nation towards overall global climate targets, we have revised our nationally determined contribution to reduce the intensity of greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions by 45% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. The efforts towards achieving our NDCs have been incorporated into the 12th Malaysia Plan and the National Energy Policy 2022-2040, NEP 2040. This policy document strategically charts the way forward and outlines key priorities for the energy sector in the coming years. It positions the energy sector as a catalyst for socio-economic development, and its progressive low-carbon nation aspiration will ensure that the Malaysian economy is able to capitalize on opportunities arising from the energy transition to remain resilient and sustainable. To implement this policy successfully so as to reap the full benefits of the significant socio-economic advances for the nation, the government is further developing several strategic roadmaps. Our paramount importance is the National Energy Transition Roadmap, which will outline the overarching strategy and high-impact initiatives to expedite the energy transition efforts. This roadmap will be complemented by the Hydrogen Economy and Technology Roadmap that will pave the way for the achievement of an environmentally sustainable, long-term energy security in Malaysia, driven by technological innovation. These two roadmaps are targeted to be launched by the second half of the year. Malaysia continues to see natural gas as playing an important role in the energy mix. I have to stress this to preclude any confusion. It will remain important in the energy mix and as one of the cleanest burning hydrocarbons to transition towards a lower carbon economy. At the same time, we recognize the importance of managing methane emissions as a highly potent greenhouse gas and have committed to join the Global Methane Pledge to cut emissions by 30% by 2030 compared to 2020 levels. Our existing major industries are also offer some natural adjacencies to the renewables and the lower carbon economy. As a traditional producer of natural gas and LNG, hydrogen represents a natural next step in the value chain and offers a potential avenue for further economic growth. We are also taking the opportunity to develop the framework and harness the commercial potential of carbon capture and storage, particularly in depleted reservoir offshore Sabah and Sarawak. The Pengerang Integrated Complex in Johor, and thanks to Aramco also, with 300,000 barrels per day of refining capacity and more than 3.3 million tons per annum of petrochemical production capacity, will also position Malaysia to meet growing demand in the region. Malaysia has put into place programs to develop capabilities within our workforce, particularly our youth. As a concerted effort with private institutions, Malaysia has orchestrated a committed effort to support technical, vocational, educational and training, TVET, because we recognize that the right human capital equipped with relevant skills will be crucial in ensuring the success of this journey. These efforts and initiatives will unlock further potential for the Malaysian economy, opening up opportunities for growth for all, in line with the Malaysia Madani framework, which encompass the 6 core values of sustainability, prosperity, innovation, respect, trust, care, and compassion. And for them, ihsan, amanah, and rahmah. While challenges are mounting, our region has the innovation, ingenuity, drive, and resolute commitment to deliver a more sustainable future. We have the right people in the room today, leaders from both private and public sectors, policymakers, financiers, tech proprietors, and a global network of expertise, each bringing a unique perspective and wealth of experience to this conversation or series of conversations. In closing, my earnest hope is that this conference will be the place where this vast pool of knowledge convenes to form practical solutions and concrete proposals for an effective and inclusive transition to net zero and more sustainable Asia. While this may be a good beginning, the efforts cannot end here. The late Austrian poet and mystic, Rainer Maria Rilke, reminds us that we live our lives in widening circles that reach out across the world. In this vein, I hope to see this conference grow into a multi-year effort that will drive and materialize these continuous efforts for systemic change towards sustainability, not just for the region, but right across the universe. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. We'd like to invite you, sir, to kindly remain on stage, as I would like to also invite Tan Sri Tengku Muhammad Taufik and Dr. Daniel Jurgen to kindly join the Right Honourable Prime Minister on stage for the official launch of Energy Asia. We'd like to invite the Right Honourable Prime Minister to proceed to the official launch podium located at the Banyan Tree. And now, as we count down from 3, we'd like to invite Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim to kindly initiate the launch of Energy Asia in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, for initiating the launch of Energy Asia. Gentlemen, please kindly remain on stage for a brief photograph before we proceed to the next part of the event. On that note, once again, we thank the Right Honourable Prime Minister for initiating the launch of Energy Asia. We'd like to invite everyone to kindly return to their seats.
What kind of world do you want to live in now and the future? What would it take to achieve your dream world? When you imagine, see, and feel, we live in a world filled with many natural marvels. And the progress we've made. We have delivered, powered, and energized lives for our present and future. But there is a price to pay for humanity's advancement. Without urgent actions, there will be irreversible damage to this place we call home. Now is the time to move faster with the responsible transition, taking actions to protect our world and society. Humanity scrambles for fair and inclusive access to energy as a basic right. Solutions require unyielding coordination. The spirit of unity, leaving no one behind. What we do today determines our fate for tomorrow. So here we are today, together, to pave the way, to forge partnerships, to turn pledges into actions, to chart a pathway for a sustainable future.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Energy Asia is officially launched with a theme, Charting Pathways for a Sustainable Asia. We hope you find the next 3 days insightful and engaging, as Energy Asia is proud to present you a stellar cast of speakers and topics designed to lead us in the efforts for a fair and responsible energy transition. Speaking of insights, ladies and gentlemen, let us proceed with the leadership address entitled State of Industry and the Role of OPEC by the Secretary General of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Haitham Al-Qais.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Honorable Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to be here in Kuala Lumpur this morning to listen to the Honorable Prime Minister. Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, great pleasure, and thank you for being with us this morning. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for his wise words and also for Malaysia's continued support for the Declaration of Cooperation between OPEC and non-OPEC producers, widely known as OPEC+. Malaysia's effective participation in the Declaration of Cooperation since it was inaugurated in the end of 2016 has been instrumental in helping overcome two industry historical downturns, most recently during the COVID-19 pandemic. At OPEC, we look forward to continue to working with the government's head of delegation to the Declaration of Cooperation, His Excellency Muhammad Rafizi Ibn Ramli, Malaysia's Minister of Economy, and his team in the coming months and the years. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my good friend, Seri Taufiq, President and Group CEO of Petronas. I recall meeting him earlier in Davos this year and listening to his views on a host of topics, including the need for an inclusive and sustainable energy transition. He's truly an eloquent and advocate and a good voice for the oil and gas industry. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia has a long distinguished oil industry history, dating back to 1910. This was the year when the country's first oil well was spudded on Bukit Telaga Minyak, Canada Hill, in Miri, Sarawak. It produced its first oil by the end of the year and continued producing for 62 years. Known as the Grand Old Lady, the well is now a monument that still overlooks the town of Miri. It is a mark of Malaysia's extensive oil history, a sign of oil continuing importance to Malaysia, and I firmly believe also to its future. This future also needs to be set into the context of the overall theme of this conference, charting pathways for a sustainable Asia. Allow me to stress that the issue of sustainable energy pathways goes to the founding core of OPEC's commitment to support a sustainable and stable oil market in the interest of producers, consumers, and the global economy. This has gained additional momentum over the past 6 years or so in working with other leading oil-producing countries through the Declaration of Cooperation. Together, we have been front and center in supporting a balanced and stable global oil market. This was clearly on display at the most recent ministerial meeting earlier in June, with the group following its successful approach of being precautious, proactive, and preemptive. The importance of market stability is not only vital for the short term, it is critical for the longer term too. In OPEC's World Oil Outlook, we see global energy demand increasing by 23% through 2045. And I see no credible way to address this without utilizing all available energy sources and with energy market stability as a guiding light. Yes, renewables will play a much greater role. And contrary to what some may say, OPEC member countries are already investing significantly in this area. Gas, hydro, nuclear, hydrogen, and biomass will expand, but it is clear that oil will remain an integral part of the mix. Every data-based forecast that I have seen shows that oil is irreplaceable for the foreseeable future. In our World Oil Outlook, we see global oil demand rising to 110 million barrels a day by 2045, and oil still making up about 29% of the energy mix by then. A massive energy expansion is required as we see the global economy more than doubling in size and the world's population reaching 9.5 billion by 2045. Moreover, as we all know, there remains a critical need to bring modern energy services to those billions that continue to go without basic energy access in many parts of the world, including here in Asia. Whilst we must continue to provide more energy to the world, we also recognize the need to continually reduce emissions and to decarbonize, subscribing to global best practices and cutting-edge, best-in-class technologies. For example, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, clean hydrogen technologies, circular carbon economy, and many other examples. Meeting the expected future energy growth while also lowering global emissions requires unprecedented investment and collaboration. Chronic underinvestment in the industry, not just for oil, but across all energies, is putting the viability of the whole energy system at stake. And this is a point that I have continually highlighted since becoming OPEC Secretary General. In our World Oil Outlook, for the oil industry alone, investment requirements equate to $12.1 trillion US. That's over 500 billion each year between now and the year 2045. And recent annual levels have been significantly below this due to industry downturns, the pandemic, and the increasing focus on environmental, social, and governance issues. All industry policymakers and stakeholders need to work together to ensure a long-term, investment-friendly climate with sufficient finance available. One that works for producers, consumers, as well as developed and developing nations. For oil, we have heard appeals over the last year or so for producing countries to play a key role in ensuring stable and sustainable global energy supplies. At the same time, however, we have also constantly heard calls to end financing in oil projects. The two sentences simply do not fit together. So let me ask the audience today, investors in the audience, would you invest if you do not see security of demand, particularly in an industry where returns can take a decade or more? Talk of no new investments in oil projects will only lead to energy chaos. We need energy clarity, not energy chaos. We also need facts, not fantasy, to take us through a just, inclusive, and a realistic energy transition. Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in recent years, we have heard of net zero targets and scenarios in which global demand drops to around 80 million barrels a day by 2030, which is more than a 20 million barrels per day drop below today's levels. Let's all remember that 2030 is only 6 years from today. Over the period to 2030, however, it's expected that another 500 million people will move into cities across the world as the global economy continues to expand. Being in Malaysia, and to put this into understandable context, this urbanization drive will require the addition of approximately 50 new Kuala Lumpurs. It goes without saying, therefore, that the world will need more oil and not less oil. Alongside, as I mentioned earlier, the need to continually reduce emissions. This returns me to the need for facts and energy clarity. What has become apparent in the past few years or so is that references to net zero numbers have sown confusion amongst investors and amongst policymakers. And this is not a positive recipe for either producing countries nor consuming countries. Mr. Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, when I listened to my good friend Seri in Davos earlier this year, a line really stuck out to me. He said when talking about energy transition, and I quote, "Don't sacrifice the good for the perfect." It makes absolute sense to me. We know we cannot get everything absolutely 100% right. Moreover, we need to recognize that we should be talking about energy transitions with an S at the end. I believe it has to be a plural, as I firmly believe, and OPEC believes, that each nation and peoples have their own energy transition pathway. The capacities and national circumstances of developing countries must be taken into account. Addressing the energy, climate issues and challenges must put fairness at its heart, making sure businesses, governments, and communities can come together to deliver genuine and real change. Standing here in Kuala Lumpur is a reminder of two things. Firstly, that Asia is at the heart of our global energy future. It has to have its own say in the challenges related to energy security, availability, and the need to reduce emissions. Secondly, the vital role of Malaysia, both as a partner with OPEC in the Declaration of Cooperation and as a regional and global energy leader through both the national government and through its national oil company, Petronas. At OPEC, we very much look forward to continuing our fruitful collaboration with Malaysia and ensuring we deliver the energy clarity that the world needs. Thank you very much for listening to me. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Haitham Al-Ghais, for giving us the insights on the role of OPEC within the state of the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our next leadership address, in which we have with us the President and